Good afternoon. We'll go ahead and start on our next presentation. What role might the liberal arts play in our federal prison system? This is the question that Sam has spent the year trying to answer. He's looked closely at the history of the federal prison system. He's looked at the causes of overcrowded prisons. He's looked at the reasons why people end up in prison and get on a cycle of coming back again and again and again. He's looked at the economics of it, and ultimately he will be exploring the education programs within prisons. It's been a joy to work with Sam, and he's got a wonderful presentation for you today. Sam, let me pray for you. Father, I thank you for the diligence and the hard work and the dedication that Sam has shown to his subject this year. I thank you that he has committed himself to a very difficult topic, a very important topic. I ask that you would give him courage as he comes up here, that you would give him wisdom, and that you would give him the comfort that your Spirit provides. You are good and we love you. Amen.
Let me introduce you to a man named Jason Dara. He was an inmate on and off for 24 years in different Iowa prisons. Once he finished his time in the Newton County Correctional Facility in 2013, he was released back into society and re-entered as a law-abiding citizen. However, this is a rare case in which the prison system actually did what it is created to do. The modern American prison system does not rehabilitate its inmates into law-abiding citizens. Instead, the prison system institutionalizes these inmates, which causes them to become so ingrained in the prison lifestyle that they never learn how to think once they're released, and they never correct the deficits that they have once they're released from prison. And in institutionalizing its prisoners, it causes a cycle of inmates who are released from prison only to recommit felonies and get sent right back into prison. Through institutionalizing these inmates, the prison system is not taking care of the people how Jesus would have had us care for these inmates. Jesus says in Matthew 25, in the final judgment, I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you fed me. I was in prison and you came to me. But when the people hear this, they don't understand what Jesus is talking about because they never saw Jesus sick. They never saw him in prison and they never saw him naked. So Jesus tells them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. We should help rehabilitate these prisoners because they are exactly that. They are the least of these. Before I get to my argument, there are first some terms which need to be defined, as well as a brief history of the United States prison system needs to be given in order to share just where the prison system came from and what it was created to do. The American prison system was developed in the early 1800s. The first prison system was the Pennsylvania prison system. This prison system used solitary confinement and silent meditation to help to rehabilitate its inmates and to force them to quit committing the same crimes they were committing. And then the next prison system, which was created, was the Auburn prison system. The Auburn prison system was very similar to the Pennsylvania system, except that it incorporated work programs, which were designed to help teach the inmates their respect for their authorities, as well as many helpful skills were learned through the taking of these work programs. The next prison system was created, which was the Federal Bureau of Prison. The next three prison systems were created by the government, which were created by the Three Prisons Act, which was enacted in 1891. The act started the first three federal prisons. Along with this, there was the Federal Bureau of Prison System was created to help monitor and maintain the humane care in the federal institutions. During this time was the first time that the prison system started to look into the biological, psychological, and social deficiencies which make one individual more likely to go into a life of crime than another individual. In the early 50s, before the early 50s was the first time that parole was created. Parole was created as a part-time release of an inmate where they were monitored and by parole officers, which ensured that they were going back into society like they should be and not going back to the same bad habits that they previously had had. In the 50s and 60s was the first time that the idea of the medical model had been adapted. The medical model is the idea that there's something wrong with these individuals. And if we can fix this issue, that we can help to put them back into society and they will succeed because they have been rehabilitated. Throughout the history of our American prison system, the goal was to always create these individuals into productive and flourishing humans. And along with this, there have been other goals which the prison system has been created to accomplish. There are three individual goals. The first goal is simply to punish our inmates, which the prison system has done. The second goal is to protect our citizens from dangerous felons, which the prison system also does. The third goal is what our prison system is not doing, which is rehabilitating these individuals into law-abiding individuals in society. Our prison system is failing and can be seen through the recidivism rates. Recidivism is when an individual completes a crime and gets sent. Recidivism is when an individual is released from prison only to complete another crime, be sent right back into prison. Recidivism can be stopped by three different ways. The first way is incapacitation. Incapacitation is when a person is taken and separated from the community from which they committed the crime in order to punish the individual as well as keep the citizens away from a dangerous individual. The next way is specific deterrence. Specific deterrence is when there's a crime that is being broken, and therefore, in order to help to stop recidivism, the law to preventing the punishment for that crime is greatly increased. The last way is rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is when the prison system creates some type of program in order to help get at the roots problems with that individual. Rehabilitation is for inmates who are not a danger for society. It's clear that the prison system is failing at rehabilitating its inmates through the recidivism rates. In just 1 year, 50% of prisoners that have been released will commit another crime and end up going right back into prison. And in 9 years, 80% of those inmates that have been released will wind up right back into prison. The current education which is being used in the American prison system is an inadequate education for rehabilitation. The education that needs to be implemented in our American prison system is a liberal arts education because it's the most transformative type of education. Before we get to the different types of education, we need to first look at who these individuals are. Most of these individuals come from the most disadvantaged segments of our communities. 60% of state prisoners don't have a high school education. And 15 to 30%, and 15 of our men in prisons and 30% of women in prisons suffer from many different types of mental health issues. Prisoners have episodes of depression, panic attacks, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar, and schizophrenia. So our prison system's response for all of these issues which face our criminals was to create multiple different types of educational and physical programs for these inmates. These programs typically cover from English as a second language into wellness education, parenting classes, adult continuing education, as well as library and several leisure activities, as well as many drug rehabilitational courses. However, the only two types of education which is being taught in these programs is literacy training and literacy development and vocational training. Literacy development is when we teach someone how to read and write, whereas vocational training is teaching the skills someone needs once they're released into society to get a job. However, neither vocational training or literacy development are giving these inmates what they need. They need a change in the way they see the world. And the liberal arts education gives this exact change. It doesn't just teach them critical thinking and problem solving, research, synthesis, effective writing skills, and public speaking or sound moral judgment. But the liberal arts education uses its way of teaching to shape individuals. The liberal arts education helps an individual once they're released from prison by giving them the will to continue to pursue a life outside of the way of crime that they used to live. And when the liberal arts education is taught to an individual and they're sent back, the people who are sent back are productive to society. And this is very needed in the poor circles that these inmates come from. And it helps to give these people another example of a person who got out. to look at a specific program where the liberal arts education is used. There is Grinnell College. Grinnell College created the Grinnell College in Prison program. It first started in 2009 and was made in 3 different prisons. The first prison is the Newton County Correctional Facility, which housed 850 male inmates and was taught to 80 of the inmates. The second prison was the Iowa Correctional Institute for Women, which housed 550 female individuals and was taught to 50. And the last prison was the Iowa Juvenile Home, which had 57 youth inmates and was taught to 12 inmates. In Grinnell's first year, they've had no reoffenders. And in the years past, they've had less than a 5% recidivism rate, which is incredibly different than all other of the different forms of education's recidivism rates. In Louisiana, their recidivism rate is typically at best a 20%. Michael Cosby was a felon who took the program in Grinnell College's first year. He said this about the program: "It gave me an appreciation for the way the other half lives, that there is another half." He also said that you choose to be on this side of the tracks. It was an awakening. After he took this program, he realized that he always had what it took to take and to be successful in society, but the program allowed him to achieve this, and it gave him the will once he got out of prison to go back. And Jason Dara took 23 credits and was released in 2012 and works as a welder. He said that the course opened a world of art, poetry, and music and math that he had never had before. Through this education, they often they cover a variety of different subjects. The reading courses also allow to help these inmates along with the Grinnell College program. There were a variety of other just as useful and programs that have worked very well, which among them is Yale's prison program, as well as the Bard Prison Initiative. Yale's program has been very successful as well, which is at a 4% recidivism rate. And they've added up their books and supplies for one inmate, which cost $165 for 1 year, but does not take into account the amount of money which is needed to pay professors to come in to teach some of the courses. Along with this, the Bard Prison Initiative, which was created, which is currently has over 300 students and was started in 2001 with just 16 students, and has given over 550 associate and bachelor degrees. To get back to the man from the beginning, Jason Dara. Jason Dara was a gang member and drug dealer. In going through Grinnell's program, it allowed him to succeed, get out of the life he lived. And Jason Dara and Michael Cosby are just 2 examples of the many inmates who come from the liberal arts. The prison system has gone through various changes to help lower recidivism. The liberal arts education is the best education to lower recidivism, get ex-felons out of the life they previously lived. But as a society, we need to help to implement this type of education because it currently costs us $60,000 a year just to incarcerate one inmate. And if we can lower the recidivism rate, it'll save a tremendous amount of money. However, the greatest reason is because Jesus told us to help the least of these, and these prisoners are exactly that. Thank you.
Sam, you're halfway there. The panel is next. Sam's panel consists of his advisor, Mr. Joe Fanning, who's 7th and 8th grade teacher here at Covenant, Mrs. Friedrichs, who is 8th grade teacher here at Covenant, I believe, and Mr. Joe Honeycutt, who is a federal probation officer. We will turn this over to the panel. Mr. Fanning.
Here we go. First question, do these liberal arts programs teach literacy to begin with, or is reading and writing a prerequisite to getting in one of these programs?
These liberal arts programs typically do teach literacy and teach reading and writing. However, that's not the main intention of these programs, and the liberal arts programs I'm talking about, I'm advocating that they should be added along with some of our current education that is being used in prison. And however, yes, I would say that the liberal arts are also the best way to teach reading and writing if you're going to do it, but yes.
What types of jobs are these inmates expected to get when they are released? Are jobs requiring or even just preferring a liberal arts degree likely to hire felons?
They get a variety of different low-level jobs, and often the jobs aren't directly related to the degree. Obviously, the people that typically get liberal arts degrees are typically not felons who are just wanting this education, but this education is, sorry, what was the question? I've really, you said.
What types of jobs are the, we'll just do the first one. What types of jobs are the inmates expected to get when they are released?
Okay. Oh, yes. Many different jobs. It really just depends on the situation and where they are and what's available. But yes, sorry.
So you made mention that the prison system in America has never adequately reformed inmates into law-abiding citizens. In the last 5 years, I've supervised approximately 200 to 250 federal folks under supervision. And I would estimate about 80 to 90% of them have successfully completed their supervision without any revocations or committing new offenses. Based on your argument here, how would you define what an adequate reformation is outside of just the recidivism rates?
I'd say, I think you can judge it from many different ways. As a Christian school, are you saying, you're basically getting at how would you define the success? So obviously not committing crimes is the biggest things we want our prison system to do. And
I'll provide you a little bit of clarity here.
Sorry.
So
Okay.
you made mention avoiding rearrest, which is recidivism, is certainly one of the most important parts of the reform stage of somebody that's been in the system, outside of just the recidivism. From a successful standpoint, when they rejoin the community, how would you define a successful reformation from that, how they reform successfully?
For the purpose of what I do it, I define it as that they are getting jobs, that they are contributing to society, that they are paying taxes. However, obviously coming at this as a Christian school, we are wanting these people to become Christians too. And that's partly why I think we're commanded to help. We should help these people, is to help demonstrate our love for them. And our Christian, we'd often come at it as in we want these people to all change and become Christians. But first, I think we just need to help them get back into society so that they're working and contributing positively. Yes, that's it.
Thank you.
What is it about a liberal arts education that changes an inmate? What do you think the mechanism is that does this?
Through studying of the liberal arts education, the great books, the idea of a great books program being in the liberal arts education does a lot to help change the natural way the inmate thinks and sees the world, because through studying these works that have been written a very long time ago, they're completely out of our typical context of modern authors. And in reading these authors, C.S. Lewis talks about how looking at reading old authors is in a way better, because these have been like tested over time. And reading these books, the morals that have been instilled in these books are very good, because it's what's caused them to survive over the years. And helping us teach these old books, like the Grinnell College read several, actually, I think they did all the Iliad, Odyssey, and the Aeneid, the other big one. Yes. And that's how I'd say is one of the key ways. But in using all the different forms of education, it seems to have the best impact. Yeah.
You mentioned in your paper that some people don't agree that inmates should be given a free education since they've already been offered a free education in the form of public school. Your rebuttal is a monetary argument. You mentioned how much less expensive it is to provide a liberal education than to reincarcerate. What if the disagreement, though, isn't motivated by money, but by the injustice of rewarding bad behavior with privileges that law-abiding citizens are denied? How would you respond to that argument?
I believe coming from my Christian background, I tend to see that it is God's right to punish. So I still see when somebody might see that as an injustice, but in the long run, I think it almost doesn't matter as much, because he's got the punishment anyway in the end of time. And I think that as a society, this is proven to help for the greater good of the society. And that's how I see it as. So yes, yeah.
One of the sex offenders that I supervise once told me, in quotes, When coming out of prison and doing a job search, or as in my case, a sex offender looking for a place to live, talking to that potential employer or landlord about some of the positive impacts and opportunities an offender took while in prison lends credibility towards trying to do something positive in a negative situation. It's a very impactful statement and goes to support potentially why a liberal arts education could be beneficial to somebody in prison. How would you encourage an inmate who is depressed or unhappy about their situation to continue pushing forward to obtain goals like gaining a liberal arts degree while incarcerated?
I think that question, I don't know. I'm trying to argue that I'm honestly not sure exactly what's the best way that we should help encourage these inmates when, I mean, all of these in Grinnell College, it gave access to many inmates to help have this education, but still so many of them deny it and don't want it. And I think that's another key issue. But there are many inmates, for the amount that don't want this education, there are still some that will go through it. And I think it's worth to do it for them. But I really don't have an answer to exactly what can we do. We can't force someone to change. And yeah, I don't think we'll ever know exactly how to best address that.
One of the things you mentioned in your paper as well as the presentation is that one of the underlying problems that these people have seen that puts them in prison is mental illness and drug addictions. How does the liberal arts education address these things? I know you said that some of it is alongside, but how can you deal with both pieces as well as giving them the dignity that this liberal arts education will hand them?
Okay. Sorry, what do you say? Okay.
No problem. How do we deal with both the mental illness as well as giving
Yes.
them
Okay.
and the addictions as well?
Yes. The mental illness issues obviously vary incredibly. There are mental health programs which are for the greater issues in mental health, they need to actually go through those programs. However, for lesser mental health issues, it has been seen that the liberal arts education does benefit, as well as going through any different types of education, putting your mind to it, it has benefits them in small ways. But yes, for serious mental health issues, they still have programs designed for that. And they still should go to them.
Are there other ways of changing one's thinking patterns that don't involve a liberal arts degree that could be incorporated in rehabilitation?
I'm sure there are, but for the point of this thesis, I'm primarily just trying to look at this way. And yes, I'm not gonna start trying to think of ideas. I don't know. Yes.
So one of the best reasons we can justify the vocational training that you had mentioned in your thesis is jobs like welding and HVAC technicians, forklift driving, roofers are jobs that are easier for inmates to get as they release from incarceration. I noticed that one of your arguments for the liberal arts education is to develop one's critical thinking, their problem-solving skills, research, effective writing, public speaking. You also mentioned that it's about $165 for one of the programs per course, but it doesn't take into account the salaries of the professors and the cost. So how can we justify when there are programs like Mrs. Friedrichs was asking, like thinking for a change or cognitive-based programs that can address some of these shortfalls? How do we justify the cost difference for a liberal arts degree as opposed to some of these one-off classes or direct programs like Thinking for a Change that addresses somebody's thinking abilities?
Okay. I think that to further test this, it does need to be there in these examples that the liberal arts program is being used. I think the current ways it's gonna have to, goodness, okay. I think that so far we still need to wait and help these programs develop even more, help to develop these small programs before we can see exactly what this is going to do in terms of how much it'll cost once it's actually at a national level versus a smaller level. But it does seem that it could potentially save more money in the long term than the other current in use programs. Although there are, yes, sorry, I'm not going to say anything else.
All right, Sam, we are done with the panel Q&A, and now we're at the point of audience. I don't think I need to rehearse all the ground rules. I think everybody's basically been here at this point. Any questions from guests, family, etc., faculty? Mrs. Baker. I'm just going to start standing over here by you, Mrs. Baker. You're the icebreaker.
Sam, you did great. I'm very, very proud of you. Sam, would you think that in like juvie, when children are incarcerated, would you think that you might be able to derive the same benefit from a liberal arts education, just, you know, pared down to their age level? Would you think that that would be beneficial for them as well?
I definitely think it'd be beneficial. Yes, except I just haven't done very much, and I'm mainly focusing on the majority of men who are under the age of 40, most of our prisoners, not juvenile, but it does seem to work in the Iowa juvenile home, but it hasn't been implemented to many juvenile homes yet. So yes.
I was interested in why you picked this topic.
I picked it from reading a book over the summer, not related to Thesis. It was just about a certain man named Larry Lawton who was a jewel thief, and he was convicted. He was in prison for several years, and he speaks about his time in prison. And now that he's out, he actually does a rehabilitative program for youth. And just hearing all about what he's done, just interested in the prison system and just everything. Yes.
Next. All right, we're going over to the junior section.
I thought you did great. My question is, in private prisons, how likely do you think these kinds of programs would be implemented when those private prisons financially benefit off of reincarnation or reincarceration? You
Yeah. 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 So I'm mainly dealing with federal prisons, and I've looked much less into private prisons because private prisons often have very little funding, and they get, I mean, so just like the other prisons, but private prisons especially have often have very limited, and their recidivism rate, it hasn't been proven to be worse, but it is also really close to being worse. Sorry, the actual question, I'm very sorry. What was the question? It was,
The question
was, Yeah.
in prisons that financially benefit off of
Oh, yes.
incarceration.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Think it would be that they would have to benefit?
Yes, so I'm not sure because I've mainly dealt with federal prisons, but yes, thank you. I don't know what I was gonna say there. Okay.
All right, we have time for one more question. Mrs. Briley.
Gotta make it a good one. What do you think, Sam, the church's role, if you're having to pay professors to come in and teach on a higher level, what about the laymen in the church that are teachers, professors? Would that be effective, or do you need to have a certain degree to be able to come in and teach?
It really scares, it, in a way, it scares me, that question, because there are two different reasons why having this teacher is so helpful. Just having the actual contact is with another human is incredibly important. And actually learning and going through the work is the other thing that's helping rehabilitate them. So I think it's an interesting balance, but I mean, in general, just being there is better than not being there. So I'd always be for people trying to help in most ways, I guess.
Sam, take a deep cleansing breath because you're done.